it's a penalty basically, paying.
Okay.
Like, a dunning process is when you go after somebody that owes you the money. So,
Are you checking
my
that?
understanding is dunnage is the penalty that for owing money, I believe. I think that's what it is.
I meant to look it up. I did look up.
It's something else besides that. What's that?
I don't know. It's in the thing from Jason.
Dunnage bags are air-filled pouches that can be used to stabilize, secure, and protect cargo during transportation.
I don't think that's what they're talking about somehow.
Dunnage pouches. There's dunnage. You said dunnage charges, right?
Definition of dunnage. Loose materials used to support and protect cargo in a ship's hold. Also padding in a ship's shipping container. Also baggage.
Okay, where did I see it here? Delete structural dunnage and mechanical equipment on the terminal building roof northeast of the ATCT. What does that say to me now with you putting your words in, please?
Loose materials used to support and protect cargo in a ship's hold.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
just
that makes
delete
sense.
all the loose stuff. I don't know what that means. There's a lot of questions on this, but I'm hoping.
Other transportation terms are camber, corduroy, demurrage, and milestone.
Hello there. Hi there. Glad I like the windblown look.
We're all a little
Right.
moist and windblown tonight.
Hello. I don't know. I think he's left us. It's like, can I make a comment? I said, not unless you have something to say, something on here. Hello, sir. How are you tonight?
Morning, or good afternoon,
Yeah, whatever it is, we're
Whatever it
here,
is.
right?
Mr. Chairman.
Sir, Mr. Scarron, how are things in the East End?
Well, very different, of course.
Well, to be
We're
expected.
sort of the Eastern Time Zone plus a half an hour out there. It's always about a degree colder in Wisconsin. Wind blows a
It's
little
often
harder
true
out
in
there.
Nantucket, too.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
A little less than a degree because we're not quite so far away. But
Now, what's your population out there in the summer and the winter?
in the winter, I don't know, it's about 50.
I thought you were the winter mayor of Nantucket.
There's
there any-
nobody to elect a mayor.
That's why you should run.
If you want
Actually,
it.
about 40% of the houses in Fisher's Landing are occupied all year round,
40%, yeah.
which is a reasonably good
Yeah,
number.
yeah.
Where is Fisher's Landing?
It's on the Warren's Landing Road as you first, the Warren's Landing Road?
Yeah, I do.
Well, it's the first, it's hard to see because most of it's hidden from the road. But
Yeah.
you
It's
can
very
see-
well done.
Yeah, you can see the first road that goes into the right and then two more.
Yeah.
Or,
Steve
three more.
Godwin lives back there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
What's your last item in your packet?
I played bridge and platform tennis with Steve.
I didn't know it was in there.
It's a good bridge player.
He's a good bridge.
Yeah.
The last item
We
is
played couples bridge with them,
budget. Yeah.
among others. All right, Mr.
Got last week's back.
Sparrow, we'll give him another minute and then
That looks like last week.
we'll start.
Remember my fear from today when I had both packets out? I did it. Last week, I remember this week's packet.
All right, 30 seconds.
You're not gonna start?
We're going to start.
I just got your name, but that's okay. There's a spelling thing on the...
Recuperating. It's sort of like hors
Oh, I thought I
d'oeuvres.
fixed that.
Sort of like hors
I
d'oeuvres.
think I fixed it on the
No, little.
online version.
What's that?
A typo on my exhibit
oh.
one.
All right, I'm called to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for December 9, 2014. Are there any objections to the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, it's adopted. Entertain a motion to ratify the warrants of December 3, 2014 and December 4, 2014.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any comments? All those in favor?
I
Do you have a comment?
have a comment. I did not sign December 4th, so am I allowed to vote to approve?
You're allowed to vote. I didn't
Okay.
sign it either
Aye.
because it wasn't
Okay.
there, but I'll sign it tonight.
All right.
It's a ratification.
Okay, just want to be sure.
Do you
So
want to wait?
No, no.
Is everybody else satisfied to go forward?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Is there public comment at this time? Pending leases and contracts, Mr. Rafter, please.
There are, I'll go through them one at a time, but at the end, we have to make some modifications based on some procurement adjustments. The first is a lease agreement with Harbor Fuel Corp. It was tabled last meeting. It's a landlord consent and waiver regarding the refinancing that they're going through. We now have all the legal comments from both sides and a final document ready for your signature or approval.
We talked about this last time. Are there any questions? Should we vote on it then? Let's go ahead. Is there a motion to approve the contract with
I'll
the
make that
lease agreement
motion.
with Harbor Fuel Oil? It's actually, it's a consent. It's not a lease agreement per se. It's a consent to refinancing. You made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Next is a contract amendment with Kevin Conrad Heating and Cooling, and that's an extension of the expiration date for the HVAC repairs in the fire station. It's a simple extension of the date.
With no additional cost.
No cost, no.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the contract with Kevin Conrad Heating and Cooling?
I'll make that
No
motion.
amendment to the contract, thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next is a contract amendment with Jacobs Engineering out of Virginia for $40,273. This is the design work associated with the de-scoping for the air traffic control tower
And increasing the total amount.
to $658,236.
Any questions?
I have some, and I was hoping you'd explain them, like, to delete the cab roof exhaust fan. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, are they going to have something that's going to work for them? Isn't that the tower, the
Yeah,
the tower?
they have a team that has looked at this, and they believe everything will work the way it's supposed to. There's some things that are not necessarily good that they had to delete for costs, but there's also a few items that are going to be add alternates that if, in fact, the bids come in low enough and we have enough money, we could add some of those back. But their
Okay.
team has looked at it, and they've indicated it'll work without that.
So that probably would be the next, on number 5, about delete all proposed architectural, et cetera, fire suppressant and fire alarms, demolition work, or is that just the work and not the fire suppressant and fire alarm?
I believe it's both, because the original design that was the $1 million over budget had certain areas that were going to be reconstructed, which would have required new fire suppression systems and things. They've cut some of that work out, so therefore the fire suppression system doesn't have to be rehabilitated in there or
Doesn't have to be
reconstructed
rebuilt? Is that what you're saying?
or changed. Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be safe. It's not going to
It
be
has.
something...
They have a whole life safety division that has to look at it, and it has to be permitted. Yes.
Okay. Trying to think. And then I saw on number 13 that they're changing LED to T8 lights. What are those, please?
I should know this. Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
Is it type of fluorescent?
Yes,
I
it is a
believe it is,
fluorescent,
yeah.
but is it more energy conscious or less energy, or what's the difference in the cost? I know I'm asking you questions. that
I
you didn't-
believe it's an upfront cheaper cost, but it's not more energy efficient, as I understand it.
And you don't, I mean, could we find out what the cost of that would be?
We can find
Would
out,
we be
yeah.
better to do LED? I mean, I'm asking probably Mr. Carberg, if that would be a overall savings.
Why don't we
to
do
us?
that, why don't we do this?
Okay.
Why don't, I mean, we can always amend the contract
Okay,
if it's
all right.
worth doing.
All right.
So let's go with the change, if you don't mind, and then
No, not at
ask
all.
Mr. Rafter and Mr. Carberg to collaborate on coming up with a proposal if it's warranted.
And, yeah, we can look at the actual cost for those things, too.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from anybody? I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment to the contract with Jacobs Engineering at an additional cost of $40,273.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The
Unanimous.
next two items, one was a contract amendment for Weston Solutions, and then there was a contract for Weston Solutions. Based on feedback from the procurement officer, we're going to need to combine those or merge them together, so it would be a contract with Weston Solutions for a total of $23,623. And this is for work associated with reporting what was found in what is known as Stockpile X, and some ongoing work there, as well as providing a licensed site professional for the stockpile that is on the tenant's site that we have to relocate. We can't, there's, I'm going to try to simplify it here. There's a number of piles of dirt, one big one in particular, that some of that must remain because it is still considered part of the FUD's remediation site, and the rest has to be removed. But we need a licensed site professional to be able to tell us what stays and what goes, so we have to have somebody oversee the relocation of the various piles of dirt that are there.
Make a motion to approve the combined contract with Weston Solutions.
I'll second that motion.
Just so everybody understands, it's all being wrapped up in the second item, the contract, new contract, and the amendment to the prior contract's going away.
Correct.
The total cost is, the combined cost is the same. Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, moving on to the FUD status.
I've been in contact with legal. They're in the process of preparing documents necessary for the relocation of our tenants, and they are also investigating other potential legal issues that we want to make sure that we're relocating them properly. There are apparently some laws, very strict laws in the state of Massachusetts with regard to relocation of tenants, and they just want to make sure that we're abiding by those, so they're investigating them before we prepare that final document.
I think we all saw that Mr. Smith got himself another site for his storage
Yes.
facility.
I didn't see that.
From
A couple
Mr.
weeks ago.
Yeah.
from the
Lowaki's
newspaper.
old land.
From Mr. Paston.
Oh, okay, yeah, I did hear that, okay.
All right, any questions?
No.
Maddox-Sham Road fence. This covers two separate topics that we want to talk about tonight. One is the concept of moving the fence to provide a form of beach access, and the second one is removing the stub fence that was on the screen the last time that I think you all remember. So let's start with moving the fence for beach access. The issue here, as one you will remember, was presented by Mr. Barretta for as part of his plan to enable beach access down at the around the Thompson House and the Divine property, in the light of the potential yard sale of certain parcels to the current owner of the Divine property. We had a long-range plan and policy subcommittee meeting on Friday, at which the three members of the committee, Ms. Planzer, Mr. Gasparo, and myself were present, and also Mr. Buscarin. And I would note that that was posted as a commission meeting because even with the three of us, it represents a quorum of the commission. So in any event, we discussed at some length the property issues, and I'll come back to those later, the general property issues. But after considerable amount of discussion, we determined that it was it was unanimous that it was our recommendation that the commission take the position of not moving the fence for a couple of reasons. One is that we're not in the business of providing beach access. We're in the business of running an airport. And process of running an airport puts certain obligations on us, which we have to follow. At the very least, we would have to go through the process Mr. Vick described when he was here of getting approval from the FAA because of the Thompson House property, I believe, is on the airport layout plan, and the area along the Divine property, abutting the Divine property. And in addition, we would put at substantial risk the runway protection zone, we believe, that takes care of the beach. The issue there being that it's maybe grandfathered now, but if the whole question of access to that area got opened up, we might be told that it could no longer be used, and that doesn't seem like a very good idea if we can avoid it. There's an environmental issue with respect to the roadway that runs inside the perimeter fence that would have to be relocated. And that would involve, first off, an environmental study. It would involve a actual cost to moving the road, and it would involve a mitigation plan for the new land that's being taken up by the road, which would have to have some other land substituted for it for natural heritage. And then there would have to be it would have to be added to the ongoing management plan for national heritage. And the bottom line is that all of these things involve some cost, potentially significant cost to the airport, which, given all the things that are going on, just didn't, aside from everything else, did not seem like a good idea to attempt to incur. So it was on that basis that we made our decision. Now I will throw it out to all the commissioners for comment before we decide how we're going to proceed, if we make such a decision. I'll also give Mr. Barrett an opportunity to speak if he wishes. But do any of you have anything that you want to say?
I just wanted to say that it was an extensive meeting. We spent quite a lot of time. There was quite a bit of colloquy around the table, and I think we were ably supported by Tom Rafter and by Noah with regard to the difficulties we'd incur in moving that fence. And I think it seems to me to be a tremendous amount of activity with the FAA, environmental issues. You know, moving the fence even a small bit would incur, I think, quite a large expense. And I fully support not moving the fence.
I would concur with the previous statements. And one of the other, we'd have to do a new survey as well of where we put it. So there's even more expense that sort of came to me after the meeting. We'd have to be surveying where it's going to go in terms of staking it. And then we'd have to be relocating it for where it goes, adding it to a plan. Just, it seems like quite a snowball. So I'm, again, supportive of the recommendation of the subcommittee to leave the fence as is.
Anybody else?
Right, and I would agree with that as long as it's our expense. If there was some way, or if someone came up with something that they're going to pay for it, we could possibly reconsider that, I would think. I mean, because big expense and a lot of work. Which is
Well, the
also
only two
expensive.
possible sources of funding would be the FAA, and I don't think they're going to pay to move their
I
own
don't think,
fence.
yeah, that's,
And the last thing we want to do in the commission is to get sideways with the FAA, which essentially pays most of our bills. And of course, the other possibility is the town. I don't know if they're, would be encouraged to do that. But again, we have to be very respectful of the FAA and their position on the runway protection zone.
right.
My only response just to, I think it's a little bit more than just an expense issue in terms of then, even if, say, there was a pot of gold, there's still work that has to then be done by the staff, another, additional with the environmental, just more an awfully lot of work where it seems to me there may be a preferred
Yeah.
alternative.
Mr. Barrett, you want to chime in here?
Dan, if I may, just before time gets up, I don't want the commission to lose sight, because I just reread, and I will send it out to the commissioners tomorrow, the position of the FAA on the runway protection zone items. If, in fact, you make a change, then you have to take into consideration their language on what is allowed in RPZ. Essentially, there's some grandfathering if if it's there right now, so.
In other words, if we changed the access there or increased the access there, they could eliminate the access completely.
Yes.
Go back to their
That-
original
that is
position.
a
Have any
potential
gathering,
ramification, yes,
yeah.
because
Yeah,
there's not
yeah.
supposed to be any public gatherings under an RPZ.
I think that, I don't know if Tom understands that, but that's one of the mandates that we're trying to operate under here, that the area right under the approach to runway 24 and runway 6 is an extension along the ground which is supposed to be protected. In other words, by some of it's fenced in, but because the ocean is so close to the edge of the runway there, the runway protection zone extends out over the beach and actually into the water. So, trespassers along the beach could raise an issue for the FAA, which might preclude, if we invade that zone by changing the fence, they may come back and say, hey, nobody should be on that beach at all. So that's one way of protecting your access to the beach without getting sideways with the FAA. And I think that's what Tom was saying in short form.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett?
Thomas Barrett, Toshma Lane. I agree with you, not trying to get sideways. I don't want to get sideways with the FAA. I'm just trying to create access out there. I understand there was a meeting on Friday in regard with town, land bank, everybody else. I've heard one story, other stories in regard to that. There was a possible funding source to do some of this work. I think the town's issue is the fact that the fence goes down 2 of the lots that exist there that are actually town Nantucket. The fence was moved. The fence has been moved 3 times in that area since this whole Divine issue. No notification that the fence was going to be moved, nothing. So that was done without any advisement from the town in regard. The issue is trying to get the beach access there. I understand what the concerns are. The underlying issue is upland travel to get from one point to the other. That's really where it's coming down to. So if the fence can't be moved back, that one section of fence that goes lateral across the front of Divine's property at Gate 29, if that doesn't get moved back, then it would be very advisable for the airport commission to try to put a warrant through the town to create that as a public way and Everett Street to be public way or something, so that it's a done deal, so that there isn't the trespassing through there, so that we can actually gain the access, or to give up free title to the Thompson House property and give that to land bank and not fight the title ownership of that.
I don't think most of the commission is aware yet of the issue with respect to the Thompson House ownership. Because that just came up on Friday.
Oh.
And it has not been discussed with the commission.
Oh, okay.
It will be in a few minutes, but it hasn't been yet.
Okay. So that would be another option to be able to do it. That's why if you remember the previous was the 2 warrant articles. One was to give up the fight for the other property, or the other sister article to it was to move the fence back. Since it's in the purview of not being able to move the fence back to the original location before it got moved, before the divine fight of moving the fence through the property and then moving it back twice, then it would be wise to just give up on the other lot at 8863. In regard to the heritage and anything in regard to that, because the town is the sponsor behind the airport, the town can take ownership of any mitigation factors for any heritage issues. So they could put aside property in Nantucket or Sconset or anywhere else on the island for any mitigating issues with any property in regard, because it is a town and Nantucket property. So it doesn't have to be within the campus of the airport.
Depends on what you're mitigating for.
Right.
There are certain species and things that need to be contiguous and on-site.
Okay.
It would be helpful if we had.
You should be aware that I don't remember exactly when it was, but within the last 2 years, we have proposed, because of this mitigation issue applies more broadly, we have proposed the idea of a bank for mitigation, if you will, that would involve the town and the land bank. And so far, that proposal has not been warmly received.
I do remember hearing or reading in regard to that. And I thought that was a very clever idea to try to help the town on all aspects of all departments in regard. And I thought it was actually a great idea because it would help alleviate in a situation like this. So aside from moving the fence back, because we don't want to go sideways, how about the jutting or the stub of the
Well,
fence?
let's get to that. We have this one issue. We'll come to that in a minute, okay?
Okay.
Tom, just if I may,
Sure.
too, and you're absolutely right, the fence has been moved back and forth. The interim guidance that came out on the RPZ came out in 2012, so it was
Okay.
after the Divine and other fence moves.
After all
and
that.
things, so,
Okay. All right. Thank you for that information.
All right. Is there a motion on whether we take a position on moving the fence or not?
I make a motion that we vote to keep the fence where it is.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? It's carried unanimously. All right, we get to the issue of the stub fence, and I guess we don't have the picture, or we do?
Unfortunately, no, we don't, but I have checked with security and others, and we don't see any reason why we couldn't remove it, so whatever the commission pleases, we can leave it or take it off. I think there's some advantage to removing it personally, because right now, if people are going around, that may be a more dangerous situation, so.
To facilitate the discussion, does somebody wish to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that the section of fence known as the stub fence be removed.
The section extends out over the,
Just the, right,
over the dune. of
towards the top of coastal
other
bank.
end.
Right.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Is there discussion?
Can you tell me exactly where it is, the stub fence? I mean, I was out there recently, and I know where the Divine property is, and I know where the,
Picture from the last meeting, I just didn't have it. at the time.
It's on if you're.
it's not the path that you were talking about, Mr. Barrett. no?
If you're on the bluff with your back to the ocean, looking at the Roberts Divine property, would be to your left in that far corner. There's a section that just, it almost like extends over the bluff, this one section of
It's
fence.
close to the bluff, it's not
It's-
that
I think
area
it's-
where it's been blocked off when there's been races and things?
No,
It's-
this
It's not
actually
that
kind
one.
of, if you were walking the path along the
Okay.
fence at the top of the bluff, going from Surfside towards Matacasham, you'll get to a point where this thing just sticks out,
I see.
and it's an excess piece of fence there. So-
Thank you.
It's the one that used to have a hole in it.
Yeah, that fence had a hole in it. Oh, sorry.
Anybody else have any?
I presume this would be a small expense, Tom?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure we can do that in-house pretty easily.
Yeah, what does it involve, just?
It should just involve
Snip.
removing some
Posts.
clamps and posts maybe or something, but our folks have done some fence work before, so
Do you have to worry about erosion, creating more erosion or anything with doing that?
I don't think it's going to impact it.
Okay, all right.
I think some of it's just kind of hanging over there now in the air anyway. So.
Okay.
I was just going to make the comment that the stub fence has been there for a while, and there's been a hole in it since it was pretty much built, and just this August, it miraculously was repaired. There's been a
That's
hole
what
in
you
it.
were talking about
Yeah,
last
there
week.
was a hole in it for the last 10 or 15 years at least, and then in August,
If
it
we're going
just...
to have a fence, we should have a real fence.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, that dates back to when it was all moved around and everything, and it was put up there, and so...
My position on this is that, I know I'm a firm believer in the theory that you can't stop erosion, but I also think you don't need to encourage it, and I think anything that encourages traffic along the south side of that fence is not a good idea. So I will vote against the motion.
And I will concur with you, sir.
Is there anything else anybody wants to say? All those in...
Well, I'd like to take that up for a second. I think, people who are going to, I think if you get people like Mr. Barata who want to be down there in that area, they're going to go around that fence, right on the edge of the bluff. I think that creates an issue too, damaging the top of the bluff. And I agree with you that, we don't want to encourage, erosion. I think if you take that fence down, it leaves the possibility of people not walking right on the edge of the bluff, but they can walk more inland. And maybe you can put up a sign saying, please don't walk on the edge of the bluff, something of that sort, to mitigate that situation. So I'm just suggesting you could ameliorate that at a low cost.
That's my thinking as well, is that this gives the opportunity to not be right on the very edge, and that by not having it there, you could follow the pathway, which is a bit inland. And I don't think that the bearing weight of a pedestrian set back from the edge of the bluff. Now, that's not to say somebody won't go over the top in some spots, and I see your point, simply because it somewhat makes it easier. But I think that there's a path there, and thinking that the foot traffic also comes in two directions. People come from Belvedere, don't know they're going to hit this, and then they want to keep going, so they got no choice but to navigate around, hang on to this thing, and get around it.
I take issue with your saying a pedestrian, Mr. Casparo, because I have a feeling...
Pedestrians.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's anything like Matagacham, and again, I don't know whether that beach is with all the parties and stuff, but I just can see young people just coming and taking advantage of it and being more than one or more than a few. But
All right, anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
opposed?
The motion is carried 3-2. The fence will be removed. All right, moving on. We did not put on here an update for the real estate, but I think it is probably covered enough by the Mattock-Sham fence tag to allow us to just update you on the discussions that Mr. Rapper has had with the town, and also a discussion I had with the town council last week. Frankly, the discussion with town council started out as a discussion of his objectiveness in representing the airport as well as the town. And he assured me that he has given opinions against his appointing authority, where the dispute is between the appointing authority and somebody else who's also representing in the same umbrella. But we got into a fairly wide-ranging discussion about real estate ownership and that sort of thing. The gist of it was, from my perspective, the most important point that helped me to understand a lot of what's been going on, or didn't help me understand what's been going on, but it helps me understand what some of the issues are. He pointed out that the property, whether it be in the name, quote, the name of the airport or the name of the town, is all owned by the people of the town of Nantucket. And by way of its acquisition, it is determined who has custody and control of that property. And some of you heard this, but the point is that there is no, one of the points is that there's no deed that needs to be filed when the property is, quote, transferred from the town to the airport or vice versa. There is a notice of transfer in essence, of the care and custody of the land. But there is no deed that's involved in that transfer. And in order to effect the control of custody and care, of transfer of care and custody, there has to be a meeting of a town meeting, which approves it, and a vote of the issue of the organization that's giving up custody and control. In the case of that 1995 town meeting, that would be the Board of Selectmen. And then the question is, what constitutes a vote? And we didn't dig down into that too deeply because he didn't have the background. I pointed out that 1995 warrant is worded quite differently than more recent ones. And I also raised the question as to whether its sponsorship by the Board of Selectmen was an implicit and effective vote to transfer custody and control, even though it didn't say that. So there'll be more to come on this subject, and I think that's a good lead-in, perhaps, Tom, for you to talk a little bit about your meeting.
Excuse me. I met with Andrew Vorse and explained to him the results from the committee meeting. And I also asked about, the other parcels and explained our understanding, just as you said.
I think I'm talking about your Friday conversation. You had two.
Oh.
You had the one Friday morning, and then you had the one yesterday.
Friday morning was essentially a discussion about the ownership of the property that the Thompson House sits on. And Eric Savetsky was president as well. And Eric, they indicated that they believe the land bank owns it, which is consistent with what Annie Bissinger sent us in terms of a deed, but the land bank is going to go through and do a title exam, and by January should have a definitive answer as to who owns that property, but it's looking like it may be the land bank. We also discussed the other parcel, which is essentially behind the Divine property, where our fence kind of splits the land, and explained to him, that based on the committee discussion, there was not an interest in moving the fence, and he said, well, what if the town came and said, well, you have to move the fence? I said, well, then I think we have to look back at the grant assurances that were signed that say this is what is airport property. So that parcel, if you will, is still in question to some extent. I also discussed with him the other pieces that are associated with the 1995 warrant article that were to be transferred to the airport, and indicated, as Dan said, there's two actions that need to be taken. We know town meeting was done. I asked him if a release had been accomplished, and he said no, it wasn't, and that the reasoning and what occurred was apparently they had been working back in '95 with Fred Yeager, the former airport manager, to purchase or bring that land over to the airport to kind of add a buffer and not have so much development down there. But then he indicated that there were a number of houses built, so there was a change of heart, that the property's there anyway, and if people are going to be building, essentially, then they should, the town should dispose of it accordingly the way they've been doing some others. So that's what he had indicated to me in that meeting. Did I miss anything? I think you were there.
Well, there was a whole lot, but
Well, it came down to two essential issues, and I think Mr. Barata has already discussed some of these. One was the path, if you will, the walking path, and being able to connect the one that goes across the top of the bluff, by our fence line, to Maddoxsham Valley Road. And, they had mentioned they'd like to bring it back around and move the fence, and that's where I told them that, I'm sorry. Subsequently, I told them about discussion on the fence. The land bank had indicated, maybe they would be interested or look at some of the cost sharing or whatever. There were some other issues with regard to the actual ownership, again, of that property that Thompson House is on, whether or not it's airport. He said it could come back that there's a piece that maybe there's some interest that the airport owns. We do own the house. We have that. We know free and clear. The other issue that was discussed was the beach access and what alternatives there may be to get the beach access. And as Mr. Barata indicated, there's a couple different alternatives. There's the one where there's that existing 2 or 3 foot path that's between our fence and the Sandy Roberts fence that leads from Russell Street to Everett Street, and then Everett Street, which is a 40-foot wide opening, that could be used as a beach access. The issue, I think, is that there's supposed to be a closing, I believe, within the next few weeks on the...
Next week?
I think it is next week, on the paper streets that Sandy Roberts was supposed to be purchasing from the town. And my understanding is it's essentially the end part of Russell Street between about from where our gate is out to the bluff, which along the bluff is Boulevard, and that's the other paper street that she's supposed to be procuring. So that has precluded the access in that area. The land bank, is looking at if in fact they get definitive answer that they own the property that the Thompson House is on, they could do something for access on the beach there. So.
Am I to assume that Sandy Roberts is the person who owns the Divine property now?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's not Roberts, I think it's Robert.
Roberts, whatever.
Right, yeah.
I'm sorry.
She owns the Divine property and is in the process of purchasing from the town those 2 paper streets. It's like an L.
Yes, Mr. Barata.
Barata. That's okay. I was advised by I went to the Board of Selectmen a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, and they're not going to sell any of that property until this whole thing's fixed. They said that the selectmen were under the impression that they weren't going to do anything out there until they could figure out how to get beach access. So I don't know about this closing. I'll follow up with them in regard, but I know 3 selectmen said we're not doing anything until we figure out how to get people there. So
That's fine, and if they follow through on what they said.
I hope so.
Then the whole thing becomes more moot from our perspective than it already is.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I mean, if that sale goes through, then it doesn't give another option that we could all look at on the table. So I'll follow up with them this week and try to find out.
Thank you. I find the issue of the Thompson ownership of the Thompson House very troublesome. Because we've had that house there for a number of years and been the obvious owners of it, and operators of it, and for the land bank to go out and purchase it without discussing it with us or notifying us or anything else of what they were doing is just disingenuous from my perspective.
Do we know when that purchase took place?
We do know. I don't remember.
We do know, but it wasn't within the past few years. It was probably between 5 and 8 years ago, maybe, or so.
I think longer ago than that.
It was in the 80s.
80s?
No, it wasn't that long ago. It was like...
I think we have the records
We have
of
the
that.
record, and I just don't remember the date.
Around 2005.
And that was done without notice to the Airport Commission?
I think it was around 2005.
That sounds right
sounds
to me.
familiar.
Mr. Mooney owned it back in the 80s through some entity.
That's the one I was thinking.
Yeah,
The Lenza that sold it.
Lenza sold it
correct.
to,
Land bank.
well, their trust.
So in any event, there's more to come on this, and if anybody has anything they'd like to put on the table for guidance, would be helpful. But we will have another subcommittee meeting to talk about this in the near future. And so where we are.
And how long is the Thompson house? When did it get moved to that property? Does anybody know that?
I believe that was in the 80s possibly.
Okay.
Perhaps we should pull the building department records,
Well, we're pretty sure we have some of that stuff.
but maybe as, to answer the questions, that might not be such a bad pot of information for us to have.
Was that house sitting on that property when it was sold to the land bank?
Yes.
Because if it was, it's not ours anymore.
Well, that's the point.
Well,
Yeah. I'm just saying,
Yeah, but the question is, was it there long enough
but
for, because it's not registered land, was it long enough for us to get adverse possession? If it, if we didn't own it and have any title to the property, was it there and we used it long enough for us to get adverse possession? We can't get adverse possession from another public entity, but we can from a private entity. So it's, it's very murky.
yeah, I'm just reviewing real property law, which I took 35 years ago, that if you have a house and it's on someone else's property and you think it's yours, it's not. If it was sold in that state to the present owner, or to the owner who claims ownership.
Do you
So
remember who sold it to us? Sold us the house?
Thompson.
the Thompsons,
That's right.
Hoyt Thompson.
That's right. Well, then,
ouch.
And we have letters that say, here are the keys and the ownership and everything else to the house.
But it was moved.
It was moved, yes.
From what,
But
from which lot?
it was moved from a lot that essentially would be down on the beach, closer to the runway. And then they subsequently leased the land from the airport, and then the attorney that helped them move the house notified him that the trust that he was involved in owned the property, which was a predecessor to Alenza and others.
Another problem with all this and tracing the history is that a lot of this is based on the assessor's records, not on the property records, as I understand it.
Which we know are problematic.
Right. So it really is a mess. And hopefully there will be some clarity before too long, one way or another.
Doubtful. We'll see.
Thank you for your optimism. All right, moving on. The budget review. This is much more fun.
Oh, sure.
Better news.
Yes, since the first draft, we took a look at some items, and basically we reduced it by about $40,700. But again, it's still a budget. It's a tool. We're doing the best we can. I just want to reiterate that our retained earnings that we're proposing to pledge towards it are 55% of what they were last year. There's no subsidy in the budget, and there is some repayment back to the town. So it's not great news in terms of a budget itself, but as I said, the budget is still being built. We're laying the foundation for it.
Any questions? Do we need is this the budget that's going to be submitted?
Yes. So we need a vote so we can send this to town, yes.
And do we want to include the repayment to the town until everything sort of gets straightened out?
Question? Do you have a recommendation on that, other than the fact you've included it in the budget?
I think he's already made his recommendation.
It's a nominal amount, I would say, to the town. If you see, it's in one of the last line items, I believe it's $135,000. It says transfer to general fund. There's $200,000 that is normally in there, and that is for indirect services. So we brought it up to 335, so there's an extra 135 in there.
What page are you in, Mr. Director,
It's
please?
on page 5.
Page 6.
Thank you. I will say I like the explanations for some of the changes, and I thank Ms. Miller for that.
I'm sorry?
I said I like some of the explanations that we have here, why things have been changed, and I want to thank Ms. Miller.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was Ms. Miller's
Very
work.
helpful.
Yes, very, very helpful.
And it's page 5
It's actually
on the,
page 5.
Yeah.
thank you. At least it says
It's
page
also
5
on
on the
It's also on page 6.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Separate line there. You see the-
Second to last line item.
So it would be
Thank you.
200,000.
It's, well, there's normally 200 in indirect charges. So
What
there's an
is our
extra-
fiscal year? What month to what month?
July to June.
Oh, really, so, okay.
July 1, June 3rd.
Right.
I don't know that we're ready, I guess I would say, for the first year being off the subsidy to start the repayment. And that's just, we have almost no buffer. We have all these new issues
There is
circulating
no
around.
contingency as we had before, yes.
You know, as we're trying to just stay on our feet and not end up in a subsidy next year.
I would rather put it in as a contingency, frankly. And we can presumably then repay it from that if we determine to.
And that, I guess that was part of what I wanted to get at. Would it then, what I would want to be sure is that it would still take a vote of the commission, and then it wouldn't be a check written because it was on an approved budget.
Right.
I think that's probably, from what I understand, that's probably true. If it's in the line item that we have it in now, they can take it because it is a transfer. Whereas if it is as a contingency, it would probably take a vote or approval from the airport.
That's how I would rather see it structured, so that it's not automatic.
Mr. Torres, did we have a motion? No, okay. Would you like to make a motion, Mr. Gasparo? To approve the budget subject to that?
I'd say my motion would be to approve the prepared budget, subject to moving the transfer to the, or decreasing the transfer to the general funds 200,000 and shifting the 135,000 into the contingency reserve expense line item.
I'll second that motion.
The budget we're approving is 2016, which commences next
July.
July.
Correct.
It's always nice to know what you're voting for before you vote for it. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and I want to understand exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is based on 14.
yeah.
We all go through this.
So what I don't understand your motion. So it would, we would put a line item in at 200?
No, there's one right
No,
below
you
it.
would take line item labeled 5991, which is currently listed under, see, we're going under the blue column, is what we're voting on.
Yeah.
Which is 335. That would get changed to 200, and then 135 would get moved to the line item below.
Just below it. 135,000 would be moved down to the contingency line item.
Which, as my intention with that would be that that 135 remains at the discretion of the commission to possibly pay back or to use it should you find another situation.
And the transfer to the general fund is the repayment? Or is
No,
that
that's
separate?
indirect expenses.
indirect.
Oh,
indirect
okay, okay,
charges.
got it. Okay.
That probably shouldn't be there in any event.
Right.
Really is concerning, but, for the time being, let's not worry about that, and just,
Try to put the numbers in the right
right.
line item, I think.
Okay.
I guess the question I would have, just because she is here and the expert in it, would be to our business manager, if that, through you, Mr. Rafter, if that is
That's
accomplishing
fine.
what I am trying to do.
I believe it.
Okay, very good.
I'll
Thanks.
ask Jamie.
Thank you.
Let the record show that she nodded.
Thank you.
And she did, I think, butter, yes.
And I,
For me to make the change before we send it for final approval,
That's right.
or to the town.
Right, send it to me.
I was also glad to see that we will not need Peter Lamb's association anymore. I mean, he helped us out for a long time, but
I have to say, too, that Jamie is doing that work, and it is fairly intense, if I may say.
I'm sure.
It's our FAA requirements, so.
Okay. I have to say that I wasn't, I mean, I see it in the fine print there, but that really hadn't struck me until right now. Thank you.
I think that's something we should particularly point out at the FinCom.
Yeah,
Yes, well,
that's big from what we've been through.
Do we know how much scrutiny the FinCom and/or the financial manager of the town is going to take a look at this? I mean,
The financial manager of the town, the finance director takes a good look at it. The FinCom takes a potshot look at it.
some take a global, some take a micro. It's all over the map on
I
that.
would presume that would be the case. I mean, one is sort of oversight planning, the other guy is, he's got to know what the
But
figures are.
Some of the FinCom
Members.
members get down and dirty,
Okay?
so.
Which-
Anything further? All those in favor of approving the budget as directed by the motion, say aye, please.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. All right. The master plan.
Master plan update, there's an advisory committee scheduled for December 18th. The packet for that has gone out with the slides and the agenda. They've completed the draft of Chapter 7 with the alternatives, the costs, and the priority matrix completed. And some additional work that they've done is updating our noise NOTAM graphics and the emergency grid map for us as well.
Are we going to get copies of that,
Of,
the revised Chapter 7? or the final Chapter
yes,
7?
yep.
I'm sorry, I got the 18th is of this month? What
Yes.
you said? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is posted as a commission
Mhm.
meeting, so there's no inhibition of anybody attending.
I'd just like to say, I won't be there, I'll be away.
Do you want to move on to the carbon neutral?
Yes, please.
I'm going to attempt, and I'm going to make a rough attempt here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Noah because I know enough to be dangerous about this. There was a meeting held with Natural Heritage regarding the solar aspect of the carbon neutral program. And essentially, I guess there was a determination that it would be a taking, and we would have to do some mitigation for the solar. That could require a significant amount of land for mitigation. And I don't know whether that would be on-site, off-site, whatever. But in any case, it represents a significant cost, one, from a permitting perspective, two, from a perspective of the actual mitigation. It could be up into the $200,000 to $300,000 range. And then there's ongoing requirements for maintaining that mitigation and so on and so forth. That kind of put a little bit of put the brakes on the carbon neutral program. We had a conference call with Katie Service at Massachusetts DOT Aeronautics Division and explained this and had a discussion about it and told her our hesitation to go forward without a better understanding of the impacts and so on and so forth. She indicated that MassDOT and Massport were meeting to discuss a related issue of whether or not some of the regulations apply to the airport or not, or to airports in general across the Commonwealth. I have not heard back from them since that meeting was supposed to have taken place Friday, but she agreed that we need to put the brakes on the carbon neutral project at this point in time, and if we're going to proceed, that we do it right and not hurry it up. You may remember that there was a pushing deadline of town meeting to try to get some decisions made, and this, I think, has just basically altered that schedule. So it's right now, we have the brakes on it. I did also explain to Katie Service that we're essentially risk adverse when it came to the financing, and we're not necessarily promoting the use of tax-exempt bonding with essentially the funds of the town or the airport. And I was told by others that that wouldn't get much headway anyway. So given those items, she agreed, we'll put this on hold right now, we'll circle back and see where we are. But is there anything I'm missing there, Noah, or that you can add? Because he knows a lot more, as I said. So.
Noah Garberg, Environmental Coordinator. Just the one point I wanted to emphasize that Tom mentioned. Within the EEA, which is the agency in which the Division of Fish and Wildlife and Massachusetts Endangered Species Act is administered and permit, there's a push and pull going between competing environmental benefits, whether it's renewable energy in the form of solar or whether it's habitat protection. And from my standpoint, they really need to figure that out before we are mitigating and competing one aspect versus the other. That's the sort of higher level agency guidance that I'm looking for.
Very good point. Thank you. So, and as I said to Katie, we're balancing environmental items with our core business of operating the airport, and yet within the environmental sphere, we have two competing interests, as Noah said. So it's starting to weigh down and weigh on some of the operating, so we need to focus more on our core business.
So what's the next step? Are we looking for guidance from the Mass DOT Aeronautics on what they think we can and can't do?
Well, we want to get some sense from them as to how, what they believe may be the impacts or what the outcome of their discussion may be in terms of application of the regulation. But then either way, as I told them, we still need to consider what the other issues are with this. And again, the linchpin here, I think, is the solar, because it is about 65% of the carbon neutral project in terms of meeting the requirements. So without the solar, the project is not necessarily a viable project at all. So we're going to wait to hear back from MassDOT and circle back with them, and once we get more information, we'll bring it back to the commission and the subcommittee and see which way we go. I apologize if I stole some of the subcommittee discussion here, Mr. Gasparo.
No, you're free to steal all you like there. Yeah. I do recall there was a discussion about that we wouldn't feel that even if the aviation folks agreed that the environmental regulations didn't apply to the airport, we wouldn't want to rely on that opinion to move ahead with our solar project,
and we don't
because
want to be
we could be that wouldn't be an authoritative opinion, and the opinion of one agency in the government versus another is that's competition. We can't rely on that being resolved that way.
That's correct.
If I could just expand a little bit, and I think both Tom and Noah summed it up well. One of the things that we were waiting on is Mass DOT's attorneys are checking whether is there some exemption that could apply from the regulations from MESA. And then and what we're looking for, and sort of what I think maybe went on said, is that essentially I don't know what the footprint in terms of acreage that we might be looking at for the solar, 10 acres. And then if we have to mitigate for that, we're going to have to put some multiplier, 3, 2, so 20 acres somewhere else that we disturb can't be then used for, it becomes essentially subject to restrictions. So now you're talking about, in total, for your solar project, 30 acres of land being, utilized, and now also managed.
And this is frankly why the earlier project,
it was
one of the
them.
reasons the earlier project ran.
Right, right. And we know we have occurrences of protected species. It's not really up for, might there be something. It's, we've done enough studies as part of the master plan, as part of just the management that we're doing, from the technical advisory committee stuff that I've seen. The plants that Natural Heritage would have some of the greatest interest in are there. And so I think that the sort of going from the subcommittee back and forth between these two items, that it's highly advisable for the commission to just pause sort of on the project until we can get some more guidance.
And how much would this cost us if we did go ahead without the mitigation and all that? You're talking about $300,000. Does the government pay for solar? Or is there I mean, I don't know, I was talking to somebody about getting solar for my house, and they said you'd never make up your money. And they said what happens with, like, Hyannis Airport, it's subsidized by the government.
The government gives certain credits that make it viable, yes. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Make it viable essentially for a private operator.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that, because Hyannis is private.
And if I may
Thank you.
expand on that, that's one of the reasons with the escalating electricity costs, if you could get some subsidy, come up with a way to generate the electricity and make it all work, where one of the things we discussed at subcommittee level is, where we are a government entity that's not going to go anywhere for quite a long time, you could, if you could be sure about your projections and you didn't have these sort of other surrounding issues and costs, and it was sort of a more straight calculation, okay, it costs this, but you recover over this amount of time, but it's so much more complicated once you throw the environmental in
Plants,
there.
yeah. Thank you.
So if the attorneys find an exemption to that we don't have to mitigate, then is it viable, or is then we need to decide?
Then I think we look further. I think right now,
Okay.
that's just my sense, is that it may be, and we would hope, because again, they're sort of wanting to be part of this first carbon neutral, and maybe, there might be a way to make that work. I still think it has its hurdles. I don't think that there's anything for nothing, if you will, sort of that there's still going to be.
Does Hyannis not have these environmental issues, or do they ignore them?
No, I believe they had some. I don't think they're nearly as big as ours. My understanding, discussions with Bud, was that he started out with a much bigger plan and got reduced because of environmental, and then got reduced for glare things and things of that nature. So, but I don't think they're nearly as bad as our environmental issues.
I think the density of the plant occurrences and that sort of thing, I think that I always go back to, and I've said, the NCF slogan, where Nantucket, where rare is common. And that's what you have, I think,
What about did you discuss alternatives like a roof over the parking lot?
We did, and that was sort of one of my, I was wondering, how else could we do this? And I think that from at least the preliminary and the information that we got back at the subcommittee level was that you had glare issues.
Yes.
In other words, the staff had gone through looking at some of these, and some of them were ruled out for that. And then others have to do with the required square footage that you need to generate a certain amount of megawatts to make it viable. And if you're only going to get this small fraction, and you come and putting this infrastructure in, it still doesn't work. And
And
the
it's
other was the
fragmented,
hangar
so it's,
roofs. Again, it keeps. I know stuff gets bounced around, but so you have structural stability issues, glare issues there. So the other option that's out there, though, is maybe some glimmer, if you will, is perhaps.
No pun intended.
Exactly, I like that. Perhaps something following the FUD sites, or if there's some aspect of disturbed land where we don't have this mitigation, and perhaps it's not a full CNP program, but is some kind of airport run, but maybe with a subsidy, assuming that sort of green energy isn't just going away, that maybe we can, this might not, it might be the end of this, but perhaps not the whole thing.
And the topic of, again, a town-wide mitigation was discussed as well. So,
I think to me, the concept was, Honeywell was going to come in here, they were going to do the project, they were going to take care of all the red tape, put this thing up, sell power to, National Grid and give us a small check. That was fine with me, but if we have to pay for this and put ourselves, in play to pay for this, I think that becomes much less attractive, at least to me it does.
And I think the other is always O&M costs on top of that.
Yeah.
For the whole
This is
system.
a project with an alleged 40-year payout. We know what happens with 40-year payouts.
All right. Thank you. Anything else on that? GA Building update?
I received today the final updated punch list from Mr. McGuire, forwarded that on to legal, and asked if they deemed it appropriate that they reach out to the surety and basically present our position on the final pay rec and try to expedite or get movement on that final pay rec, because once that is submitted, that's when certain deadlines and the clock starts ticking on certain deadlines. So I don't know that there's an interest by the contractor, so I asked that our legal contact the surety's legal to see if we can get that moving so we can close this project out. So that's where we are today on that.
We did get it, though. We did finally get it.
We did get the punch list today, yeah. Unfortunately, there was a death in the family, Mr. Guire's family last week, so.
All right, your report.
On the control tower, the bids are due out December 17th. Filed sub-bids are due January 7th, and the general contract bids are due January 21st. We had a discussion about the, potential of what if the bids came in a little higher. For example, let's just say 100,000 over, and if we don't want to lose $2 million over $100,000. So we had a conversation this afternoon with Brian Turbot, the finance director for the town, and looking at ways that we could address those type of issues. There's worst case scenario and best case scenario, I said, and it's going to come down to, I think, waiting to see where the bids come in. But we're looking at strategies if need be. It may require an additional warrant article that I'm not sure if we can get one in yet, or it may be covered under an existing. They're going to look into that. So we're keeping an eye on it to see if, we don't want to, like I say, lose a lot of money over a little bit of money. So the security project, fence work is done. There's a couple minor tweaks that need to be done there. The light pole on the corner of the building is on order. It's a special type light pole, and there's some additional work that needs to be done that wasn't indicated in the plans. We also had a conference call today regarding the interactive employee training, and Mr. Tallman has written to the engineer explaining that we don't believe it meets the spec and the product that we're intending on getting, so we have to work through some items and issues with that group. The website redesign with the WPI students, the final presentation is December 16th at 1:30, and I believe it's in this room. Unfortunately, I have a conflict. We have union negotiations at that time, but I did see what essentially the map of it's going to look like, and I think it's going to be a nice update.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but they asked me if I'd come in and take a look at it on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, Thursday, Friday. I'm not going to be around. Is anybody else interested?
I have an appointment with them on Thursday to do it.
Do you? Does anybody else want to take a look?
I don't think I'd understand.
I'd like to, but I won't be here this next week.
This week.
Oh, this week, Thursday? Yeah, I'll be around
Yeah, they're
Thursday.
there all
What
day.
time?
They said all day. I mean, those guys seem really flexible.
Yeah, they're
She needs to
usually
probably
pretty
put
good.
you in touch with them, I'm guessing.
What time are you going in? Not that we have to do it together.
No, I will.
Probably should not.
Calendar.
Yeah.
What time did I have them?
I don't think they specified a time for me.
I'm meeting with them at 10.
And this is where? In the,
At the GA building. I mean,
in the
the
GA
Our
FAO.
office area, yeah.
where?
By our office.
Okay,
They have a small office upstairs.
okay.
I have an 11 o'clock meeting somewhere else, so I won't be there more than.
Thursday, they just said any time to do this, Thursday or Friday.
Okay,
I'll forward it to you. Let them know. We'll be in touch.
sure, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
On the RFP side and bids, we received the bids for GPU on December 2nd. They came in slightly above what we projected, but we do have sufficient funds to cover it. The firehouse flooring bid is due this Friday, and still working on preparing the bid for the tug. On the operations side, Thanksgiving and Stroll weekend, the financial results, Thanksgiving was up from $78,000 to $100,000 in total sales on the FBO side of the house. And on the on Stroll, it went down, though, about $19,200. So the net is still a little
Despite the
bit higher.
freebies on that landing fee, I was deeply shocked about that. Obviously, that didn't work out.
Well, the weather had a little impact on some of that, too. And that was my next item. The weather on this past Stroll weekend was, as you know, horrific. However, there were some challenges, too, with customer service in the terminal area with regard to some passengers not getting information, not being rebooked, et cetera, et cetera. I reached out to Cape Air. They got back to me, and we're going to have a conference call, I believe, this Friday afternoon to discuss this, to go over and make sure that they have a plan in place to adequately address as best they can some of the items. They indicated that they had a pilot shortage, that they did have some mechanicals, and that there were some weather issues. So bottom line is we want to make sure that they have a plan in place for irregular operations so that they can at least provide the best service to the customer, because we don't want to give a bad taste to people that, they get stranded here or whatever. So
I personally feel that they knew the Stroll was coming. They should not be understaffed is one thing. I mean, I understand mechanical, but you get all your manpower in.
I will say that there was a plan developed by one of their staff members a couple of years ago, and I sent that to their corporate office to ask if it had been acted on. It was specifically geared around this type of event. For Stroll, for Daffodil, if in fact bad weather were to come in, how would you address that? And he laid out some ideas and things, and I wanted to know, have you taken any action on this? And if not, what are you doing to develop a plan? So we're trying to work with them to improve the customer experience. Just a note, tomorrow night the Board of Selectmen has a workshop to review the warrant articles, and I believe they will have the warrant articles that the Planning and Land Use Group will have with their maps. You may recall that there are some that we've asked that they modify some zoning at the airport to accommodate the master plan and some other items. So I'll be attending that if anyone's interested. The DIJ, Don Jacobs update, he has provided me with a proposed classification characteristics chart, and we have a meeting scheduled for Friday to discuss the compensation categories and salary ranges. And as soon as I get something firm on that, I will circulate it to the commission. Just an update, we had an internal meeting on the airport certification manual. We had to review a number of items and update them. We also just received back today comments on our sign and marking plan, and luckily it's only one page of changes that need to be done, and that should be accomplished by the end of the week. We also met internally, Jamie and myself with various departments in the town and town administration to review prior capital projects and discuss reappropriation or rescinding of funding that may not be needed anymore to clean up some of the old projects. And lastly, just a reminder on schedules. Janine is off next week on vacation. I will be on vacation December 22nd through January 1st. That's my report.
Getting back to this Stroll and the confusion, have you ever thought of, or has that ever happened, like you have an ambassador or somebody there that would smooth things out for people? Or
if you may recall, a few meetings back, I reported that we met with the Visitor Services Group, and they have proposed putting ambassadors in the terminal. Their budget was cut slightly, but I spoke with Kate, and she said that they can still do something. And we looked at a schedule for certainly the season, but also for events like Stroll and Daffodil. So yes, that's.
Want to be that ambassador.
What? No, but I mean,
Put a
at least
target
you've
on
got
them.
somebody to comfort
chased
you,
out
and,
of town.
Well, and that. No, but that is a big part of what needs to be implemented in a plan, is communicating to the passengers
definitely.
where they are, what's going on. I mean, unfortunately, because of the nature of the operation that the airlines have here, there were a number of people that had connecting flights in Boston that missed them, and because they're not on the same airline, they have to now pay that fairly exorbitant change fee, whether it be for a different day, a different time, or whatever. So it has I would say, a more significant impact
One of
here.
the points that I made, and I don't know how they've been able, or whether they've been able to deal with it, but one of the points that I made to the group from WPI that's working on the website is having some central source of information on our website, but that information is only as good as what the airlines give us.
And that, yes.
And, but this is a huge frustration, not only for us and for particularly the passengers, but for people like innkeepers who have to deal with the people as well, who also come back
Right.
to them.
I'm going to be reaching out to the INM as well, because Cape Air has asked too, how do we get on that alert system just like the boats are? So, again, we can put them in contact, but as you say, Dan, it's only as good as the information you get,
Islander
that
is
they
on
give
it.
you. On the
Alerts?
alerts?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, Cape has asked that night. I said, I'll get a contact from the INM who would do that with.
Yeah, I
Well,
was going to say, you don't think that requires much.
Right.
I'm not going to say
And also getting back to the,
Advertiser,
you know,
I'm crying out loud.
a big one.
the airlines are a service industry, so you just have to give service to your people and make them happy. I mean, that's part
I
of
just
being
remember-
business.
I remember long before I was involved in this position, making a comment maybe 5 or 6 years ago to one of their representatives, saying, it's looking like there isn't the same commitment to Nantucket. Oh, we'll always be committed to Nantucket, so forth and so
Well, that's
on.
what people tell you, Dan, when you got your hands around their neck.
That's right. But, I mean, it's something that-
We can't fall to the mentality of a seasonal resort where, well, you're seasonal, you're going to be there, and it's going to happen no matter what. That's basically what we don't want to happen.
All right, anything else? Mr. Guzman?
Just comments on the manager report, back, if that other discussion is done.
I think so.
Back to the air traffic control tower. When did you say those bids were due?
December
The-
17th, I think some of them are.
And GC ones are the, what, the 17th?
Yes, and the subs are due the 7th.
So essentially, for the 17th, we'll know. And we don't have another meeting until January, so will you update the commission?
I'm sorry, say that again?
We won't have another
Another
meeting, so
meeting?
will you circulate an
soon.
email
Yeah,
or
sure.
Our
something?
meeting is
Yep.
before the 17th, actually.
No, you said
Well, no.
December
No,
17th. there.
January 17th.
January, I'm sorry, that's, yeah.
I
that's
thought he
January.
Okay,
I thought he
that's
said- yeah.
why I was...
Right?
We'll know
Yeah,
what the
it's
substance
Jan-
is,
it's
January.
but we won't
Bid
know.
packages are available on the 17th of December.
Oh, that's what I thought I
Oh,
heard. was
okay, so they're
December.
The
due.
packages are due, but the response is due in January.
Yeah, filed sub bids are January 7th, and the generals are January 21st.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. I'm just trying to, I got to get back to the discussion because time's going to get,
Well, there's also the issue that the warrant is closed around the 21st.
that's exactly what I was getting at here. And when you had mentioned in your discussions with the finance director,
What I want to know is, do we need a placeholder even?
right,
Even if we just put it in?
that's what I'm getting at
You
is,
can ask for a placeholder.
right.
Okay.
And the other, and I was just wondering about the timing. I just wasn't clear from the report. And it's very clear to me now, we can't just wait to see what that number is and maybe it's above. I think we have to take a position that it's likely to be above, and then if you don't need it,
Right, it's
you're in a
easier
better
to do.
position. And my other reason for thinking about that is for the costs for the construction administration for the project, which isn't included in that. So if we could get an estimate from Jacobs, written estimate, then we can have a sense of what that's going to be,
Why can't we get a contract from
or proposal, sure, I mean, we're going to need,
We're gonna-
whatever you
we-
can get from them, I guess, would be,
We need 9 feet?
but more would be better than less, because then we don't have another delay.
They're always our friends from the Bedford.
We'll do that.
But just, thinking about percentages of contracts, that could be another few $100,000 there for the administration, and if we're thinking that the bid that we've already de-scoped
Yeah,
to come by the skin of our teeth on that, I think it's a pretty sure thing we're
I don't
going to
have a
need.
comfort level, so.
I think it's you can almost comfortably assure, tell the finance director we're going to need a little bit more, and it's one of those cases of, you have to spend to save. If we don't want to lose the money and the grant, then we're going to have to spend a little bit more
Right.
to
But
use
plus,
that.
we could also use more because we are,
Well, then we don't have the design for that, that's the only thing.
right.
But if we have enough, yeah, we can design and add stuff, so.
But if the position
So
is
it's not
simply
gonna hurt
that
us either way.
we need to at least be able to do what, we can surely show to the finance committee that we've de-scoped. Again, we've already made that effort, because that's going to be the first thing they ask if you say, I need $350,000 or $500,000 more. And say, well, wait a second, why don't you cut that back? Well, now we have this other contract, like what we approved tonight, that was on, money we've spent to scale it back.
It wouldn't be worth giving a heads up to the chair of the
Finance committee.
Chair of the capital projects committee too. Once
Yeah.
you reach a conclusion on what
I just think we have to be out ahead of it,
what
Yes,
plan of action you're going to.
good idea.
because if we wait till the 21st, all of a sudden the warrant's closed, and we're in some other behind the eight ball versus right now by talking about it, perhaps.
Because it might be too late already, is that right? Or not?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it will be soon, though,
Right.
right? Because the Board of Selectmen still have the ability to put something on the warrant as well. And by doing it this way, it doesn't have to be some adjustment to another article where then you're doing this too late scramble. It's, okay, well,
But there's also an issue of a bridge financing, if you will, because town meeting isn't until the end of March, early April. And, so we want to be sure we can sign that contract on a timely basis.
We get into these details a little, and they cannot do that with a not to exceed or anything else. What may have to happen is we may have to take it out of our operating, and then at town meeting, go for a transfer from retained earnings into our operating.
okay.
So that's what makes it a little difficult in terms of this placeholder. What's the language going to be? It's an either or. It depends on how it comes in, I guess. So we may just write it for the worst case scenario. Go that way.
I think we probably
So do you
should.
draft
Right.
that warrant yourself?
We'll
No, I
talk
think
to
we should
legal
get- I think
counsel.
we should get town
Counsel,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Let's not putz around with it.
Okay.
Thanks. That's all I had.
Anything else? Anything further from the subcommittees?
I think we covered it.
Exhausted.
Pretty well covered. All right, are there any commissioners' comments?
Well, I saw the video, a good part of it, of the fire drill, and I thought it was very
Forgot to mention
interesting.
this.
And, having been there, I saw more things when I was watching the video than what I saw there. But I thought it was good.
I did
It's
too.
on
I saw
Channel
it.
18, yes. Yeah.
I forgot to mention.
Only Tom was labeled as Anthony Buscarin.
There's what?
Do it again?
You can do anything you want now.
What was that comment?
At the beginning, it says Tom is speaking, and they put the byline under it, like who it is.
Oh, really?
But it was your name.
Oh, really?
I'm
I'm glad I'm getting some credit.
And I think Charlie, who's in the room there, is probably the person who was instrumental in doing that. So
Yeah.
thank you, Charlie.
All right, I would just like, you have something?
Yeah, I just had one, and I don't know if this should have been followed, but I had it down for comments anyway, but the manager hit on it. But it has to do with the land use warrant articles. I'm somewhat concerned that they're coming out tomorrow for changes to zoning and land use on the airport land, and we haven't seen them yet. And it was, back to what we were saying about how we're not, we haven't really discussed. I'm afraid that ball could go too fast.
Might I suggest this, since we aren't meeting again, at least not for now, until January, that we authorize Mr. Rafter in consultation with up to 2 commissioners to request any changes to those articles that he thinks is appropriate, and report back to us in the January meeting.
That, or we have another long-range subcommittee meeting, that would be no other way. I don't know if
Well, how long do we have to comment?
and we haven't even seen
I
them.
don't know, it's the first time they're
Well,
coming out, I
that would be
think.
another option, yeah, clearly. We'd have to do it really next week.
Don't you have a meeting for the 18th, don't you?
No,
Oh, that's for
Work
the master
group.
plan, sorry.
Master plan.
Because you're leaving when, Tom?
Monday, the 22nd.
Well, we'd have to do it next week. Well, see what you think tomorrow.
Okay.
And I don't know that we need a motion, but I think I would ask you to lean heavily on Mr. Gasparo for advice.
Certainly.
Or I just
And
would,
if you think there should be a subcommittee meeting, let's do it on Wednesday,
Okay.
maybe.
or Friday.
Friday's good.
Friday might be.
You're not going to be here.
I'll be back Friday next week. I just like to attend
Yeah,
these
but
things.
it's not a lot of time afterwards to get our comments with him leaving on
Right,
Monday.
right.
I think we probably ought to do it on Wednesday, with due respect.
Well, let's see what they
I'm
come up
leaving
with.
Friday also.
Okay.
I'm not sure what time. Around noon.
All right, we'll see what they come out with.
And the date of this meeting that you're thinking, or you're having, is what,
It's
please?
17th.
17th, thank you. That's a long range,
No, yeah,
and they're posted?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
They're
Time?
posted- They're posted, we don't know.
Arthur, I did make an attempt to get that. I asked where they
We can
were,
have
and
it.
Erica directed me
Okay.
to the
Thank you.
citizen warrant articles, and I
No.
asked,
I
I
think
wanted
the
the town warrant
town
articles, and she said they
website.
weren't posted as of yet. That was
I think you gotta get them directly
earlier.
from Andrew.
Maybe Janine will let you know.
Okay, please,
Or
Janine,
it's-
thank you.
You just kind of show up to the selectmen meeting, and there's going to be a map that says this is how we decided to, what the planning department decided to change the airport zoning. And I know there's been discussions with Richardson, so I know that there's, they're not, but the last thing I saw was to go to residential zone, which I said was on the big piece, and that's a concern to me.
Okay.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say that in that same, similar vein, one of the things that has sort of struck me as we've tried to wade through this morass is that there needs to be better cooperation between us and the planning department, and also on this one issue, at least the land bank. But there needs to be cooperation, coordination, and a common front, I think. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening, and our action tonight probably is going to exacerbate the problem a little bit. But if we had had a chance to talk about this all before it was done, and so forth, and if we got out there, we might have avoided some of the mess that Tom and May particularly have gotten themselves
Right.
into in the last couple of weeks.
I would hope, Dan, that going forward, too, that if there were actions that they're taking, that they would coordinate with us or advise us.
That's part of what I'm talking about going forward. That what's done is done, but let's not continue.
Continue it.
So is the Board of Selectmen working group to discuss warrants for land swaps this week, tomorrow?
Tomorrow night, it's a
Tomorrow night?
workshop.
There are warrant articles that will cover a range of things. I think
Yes,
everything from
but-
zoning
but
to
I-
more yard sale parcels and.
I think the way Andrew was saying it will be broken down into one big one for zoning and one big one for, land disposition, that type of thing, I believe.
Where does that take place?
Unless the Board of
Here.
Selectmen says otherwise.
Here? What
Yes,
time?
6.
Okay.
All right, I have nothing else. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session, to review executive session minutes for those various dates that are enumerated for possible release, and we have a couple that have not yet been written, so, but none of the subject of none of them is yet appropriate for release. Anyway, we need to do that quickly.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Top?
Aye.
Ms. Lanzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Do you have anything for us to sign there?
Wouldn't be a meeting without it.
Some question.
Oh, these signatures.
Oh, no. Yeah, here they are. Yeah, I just saw that I will bring copies to the meeting, and I didn't want to go further.
We're going to need to.
Back curtain. Uh-oh. Exactly. Yeah, how about the bouncy chair?
Yeah, I know. That's in timeout right now.
Yeah, it's been over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in timeout. Okay, so
worst case
there
scenario.
should be two. Yep, so this is
Where
the
if we have to
Eastern
extend
Bank,
our operating to pay
Harbor
for the
Fuel
tower, we're going to need half of the
consent of the
retainer.
landlord, so
There's
Dan is
probably
signing
a
the
prior
first
one that we
here
could,
on either one of those two.
this is one last year,
Two
to
copies.
appropriate from retained earnings that come out into the operating.
That's if it all gets expensed.
Yeah.
And second copy
In other words,
of,
if we have to tap into our
so
operating
say,
account for
we're
200,000,
offering for 4 months.
we don't have that operating account, but yeah,
No, we're authorized to borrow that now, at any time.
but they will not do a borrowing until they're going to wrap all the borrowings into one, otherwise we have to pay the expense of that borrowing. I think, that's a good point, we could check with Ed Weiner.
So
Because
this
you're
is
right,
the
they're
Kevin
authorized. They could go out
Conrad
and borrow
contract
tomorrow.
amendment. That's what I thought. Copies.
But will they?
You'll see those, so either one of those two lines.
But the other thing is that do they take into account any reimbursements that we've already done? Like, what she just put up for like $1,000,007.
I know,
So do,
that reduces the amount they can borrow. Believe it or not.
no, I know it does.
Backwards, but
No, I know it does.
anyway, we'll talk to Brian again and find out what exactly it is. And I think we go with the worst case operating. If we don't need it, we don't need it.
To tap into retained earnings. If
To-
we overspend on
On
our
our operating to pay the capital. And then there might be a separate one needed to transfer the money from operating to cap. No, he mentioned something or something else. Eventually, there's going to have to be a transfer of that money, that capital.
I'm sure that there's one like that already written because we've had to do that before when
That's what I
old
thought. Yeah, when we
finance
didn't have the
director
money.
had to do, no, when she had to put everything to operating
That's right. That's right.
and then transfer. That's why I was having some trouble matching some of the expenses for any.
Well, we can
capital
ask
project.
May to check a couple past year ones to see what's there.
Get some examples.
Yeah. At least
I'm sure that
Easier
there's,
start.
I'm sure that there's examples prior to.
we're going to put you on this. Looking for old warrant articles from the past couple of years about.
Good night.
Bye, Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Night, James. Thanks. Doesn't sound like it's raining. This
Tom's is not off.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
I'm not going to worry about the fact that he's in there. Exactly. There's nothing.
I have these minutes for 2 of the meetings.
If people want to review them, we could.
We'll just see it happen.
Yeah.
Do you want this on or no? There's nothing on it. I mean, it's take one and pass it down. It's
Thank you.
anybody's going to determine that you can't
Where do we stand now on the labor negotiations, Tom?
We have a meeting, as I said, on the 16th. Before we go to the job descriptions, I've been working with Mike O'Neill, making some minor changes that they requested. And there is the overall general language that our attorney proposed to Tim Mahoney, and there's some tweaking that needs to be done there, so we're fairly close to having a final document ready to go. I think this, this meeting and then...
Because I noticed they had the, I guess it was on the FinCom agenda yesterday, a couple of the town contracts were...
They're all in the warrant article. Yeah, there's one for each union
that's right.
on there. And the salary increase, my concern was that it would be a retro thing and we'd have to pay twice in 1 year, but they've indicated it's already in the current year's budget, so it won't be a double whammy.
Oh, no, we want this off.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you guys done?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because I'm just filling in tonight.
Oh.
Okay, so.
No, are we live?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
we cut?
Yes, please. How did this go on again? I didn't...
Were you getting our
So
voices?
much for executive session.
That's all right, we're good, for tonight, thanks.
So we're hoping 2 meetings possibly